Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast with your host, Kareen Zutleger. Join us as we uncover the hidden thoughts, stories, and moments that help bring light to the healing power of truth and examine how silence can affect us mentally, physically, and spiritually. We'll also share profound stories, interviews, and transformative narratives to help release ourselves from the hidden and step into healing towards inner peace, joy, and fulfillment. Now, here's your healing strategist and host, Kareen.
Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast. And today, my guest is Ashley Maas. Ashley is the founder of Rise Up Experiences, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself.
Just going, making a roll right in there. Hi, I'm Ashley. Okay, so tell you about myself. Wow. Well, this can go in so many different avenues, but really, I feel that my purpose here in this world is to help women specifically lead and live happier, healthier, and richer lives. Like that's just the foundation of everything that I do. I'm a huge advocate for authenticity, huge advocate for vulnerability, and it's awesome that I'm here. And Corinne, we were talking about a situation like a little bit ago, and how ironic it is to come onto the podcast of the Secret Keepers, because I feel like a majority of my life I kept and held in a lot of secrets about who I was, about how I felt about myself, about things that were happening in my life. And it came from this fear of hurting other people or people. I fell into like this people pleaser complex, right?
Sure.
And now being in a position that I'm in now, I've learned how to just express myself and who I am and understand that it's all just almost like a big, huge part of me as an individual, just sharing where I'm at, what's happening in my life. And I feel that, yeah, that's just basically what led me here.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love that you're just really authentic, and you too have a podcast
Mhm.
called
Own your shit.
Understand. Yeah. Okay. So, and in largely, it is really you letting people know that you take responsibility for the different things that go on in your life, and starting to come to those awarenesses of, how everything that happens, and I use that in air quotes, to us is really, there's that gift in it when I can come to a level of awareness to see
Mhm.
how did this affect, or how did I have impact in this, and what's the growth gift in it, because that's what life is really about. Life gives us lots of pop quizzes and things for us to tweeze the good things out, even the worst case scenarios that go on within our lives, right? Things that happen to us, we can take and look for and glean the good out of some of it. Sometimes it takes a little bit of processing in order for that to happen, and you are doing the work. You're doing
Yeah.
the work, and you see it. And tell the audience what you do for a trade.
What do I do for a trade? So I am a real estate agent here in Northeast Wisconsin, and I partner with a brokerage here called Take Action Realty Group, and they are amazing. And then I own Rise Up Experiences, and I run that with my co-creator Lauren Shane. She is a certified sound healer. I am a certified breathwork facilitator. So we do a lot of in-body work, which lands makes sense, right? Learning how to work through the stories, the narratives, the conditions that we've grown up with, and just reprogram our mind and our energy and our vibration to be in that of gratitude. And so doing breath work, I run in that, I guess, umbrella of Rise Up. I host retreats all around the world. I also take private clients. We do group monthly sessions that have been from a space of collaboration. So the one thing that I always say to everyone is we live in such a competitive society where people, women specifically, are always in competition with one another. And the way that you really heal those sisterhood wounds is when you can come in community and come together and share, like, hey, what is it that you're passionate about? How can we help bridge that in what we're doing? And we have found that we could totally go out and get Reiki certified and life coaching certified and nutritional science certified, and get all of these certifications underneath our belt. But I also believe that, like, when you are a student of all the things, you become a master of none. And when you focus on the 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 passions that you have, you allow space for other people to kind of fill in those gaps. And it's so awesome. So, yeah, Rise Up Experience is really a collaborative community, is what it is. And we bring a lot of different modalities into people's homes, into their minds, into their bodies, so that they can learn, like, hey, there is something beyond my traditional 9 to 5. And I am all of a sudden really passionate about becoming a breathwork facilitator. Like, where is that coming from? So yeah, those are the main two hats that I wear. I'm also a mom to 3 kids. I'm solo mom. I have twins and a 4-year-old daughter, 2 Manny Jennies, the twins, and then a reflector, my daughter, and I'm a projector. You know, anything about human design, you can kind of see, like, how my kids and it's just like this vortex of energy. And it's just, I'm very blessed and very grateful. I will say that.
So for anybody that's not familiar, Ashley's referring to the human design. Look it up. I am a generator. So I help, be the wind beneath the wings often. And I also have lots and lots of energy for things that I'm passionate about and that's the gift in that. Can you just tell the audience a little bit about, first of all, like, your draw to the secret keepers? There's, obviously something, a little bit of a story for you to tell.
Yeah.
Just, share with the audience just a little bit.
Sure. Okay. So I would say this is something that came from a personality trait that I identified with. And for a majority of my life, I always considered myself like an extreme introvert. And a lot of people that know me or have met me at some points in my life would describe me as pretty mousy, very quiet, very, oh, she's always in the shadows. She's always in the background, or anytime. Like, that's how I grew up.
Okay.
And it's interesting because when people meet me now, they're like, oh my God. Or when I see people from my past, they're like, you're completely different. Because it's like I finally learned how to settle into the woman that I am. And I was done fearing the parts of myself, the parts of my life that I kept behind closed doors. So when you were posting about your podcast, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful representation of how I grew up. And my whole entire life, I am the oldest child. I have 2 younger sisters, and my childhood for the most part was fairly good. My mom is from Mexico. My dad was in the military, and that's how they ended up connecting. My mom did not speak any English when she moved here. My dad did not speak any Spanish, and he read a Spanish dictionary every single day until he became fluent so that he could learn how to communicate with my mom. And I grew up with like this beautiful fairy tale love story of love at first sight and the fireworks. And I always thought that that's what my life had to look like. And if I didn't have that, then I wasn't in the right place, or it wasn't the right person. But also in the same breath, I always had like this fear of running out of time. And so I settled into a lot of relationships that weren't healthy, but were also mirrors of my parents' secrets and my parents' shadows. And it is just awesome to see people coming into this podcast and sharing whatever secrets mean to them. But for me, it was watching my parents create this love story narrative, and behind closed doors, it wasn't like that. There was a lot of struggle. There was a lot of financial struggle. And me as a child, like, felt it, but I didn't understand it. And when my parents ultimately ended up getting divorced, my dad left my mom for another woman. My mom went through like these intense battles with depression, suicidal ideology, suicidal attempts, and all these things. Like, I remember going to school in 8th grade, 9th grade, like when you're really at the prime of puberty
Yeah.
and like your whole life's kind of blowing up in your face, and you go to school, and I was so passionate about playing volleyball. I never talked about what was happening at home ever to any of the people in my life. I had two very close friends that I would tell things to and just say, like, my mom's struggling. She's always sad. She's always crying. I didn't really, like, I knew what depression was, but back in the like, it wasn't really talked about. And I lived in a small town too. So there was a lot of fear of, like, other people finding out and thinking that something was wrong with my family. And it was also interesting because at the same time, my best friend, her parents were going through a divorce and a foreclosure on their property. And that made it on our like small town newspaper, because you can see the foreclosures listed, and everybody at school found out. And so there was so much fear of, like, oh my gosh, we had this big, nice home. We lived right on the water. It was like at a wooded lot. It was like the perfect traditional American dream. Like, what if people find out that my dad left my mom for somebody else, and my mom's struggling with all these issues? Like, how are they going to look at me? And what are they going to think about me? And I was so concerned with how everybody else perceived my life versus how I felt about my own. And it almost like manifested. And it's also super cool that I got into breath work like later on in my life, because I started to suppress every experience, everything. I took on the role of being a parent for my younger sisters and for my mom and for my dad. I took on the role of taking care of everything around the house, getting a job at a young age, providing financially in any way that I could. And nobody knew that I was struggling so much with depression and with also suicidal ideologies. I didn't want people to see me as weak, so I just shoved all of that internally, which coming full circle with this whole entire experience, I didn't realize how much damage that did in my life until I was in my mid-20s and until I started to get sick. And I didn't know that I was sick until I was pregnant with my twins. And this is a story that I've shared here or there. And I think it's such a beautiful representation of how sometimes harboring in these secrets or harboring in these emotions or identities or roles that you take from others, how that manifests into something ugly internally.
Yeah.
And when I was pregnant, I found out at 8 weeks that I was having twins. I was told that I was probably going to lose my son because he was so much smaller than how my daughter was, and that it was normal for your body to just absorb one of the twins. Didn't know that. And I'm like, how are they talking to me? This, like, it's normal.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Maybe in the science world.
Yeah. Like, I don't get it. So that already like started manifesting some limiting beliefs that maybe I just wasn't going to be a good mom. And maybe I wasn't meant to be a good mom. And at the time I was in a marriage that I had intended to have for the rest of my life. Like, you don't get into a marriage thinking you're just going to separate one day. And all the things that I kept as a secret or that I harbored resentment in my body started to manifest into my marriage, into my pregnancy, into my job, my career, how I felt about myself. And I had no idea why I was experiencing such a disruption of inner chaos that was being shown to me externally. So basically, when I got pregnant, I was considered high risk because I was a twin mom. As time went on, I was about 7 months pregnant. I was 90 pounds heavier than I am now. I'm 130 pounds, 5'6". Like I was, I was 210 pounds. Okay. And anytime I would go to the doctors, they would tell me it was normal, that I was a twin mom, but you could see the water retention. And anytime you would like press down on my skin, there was just like an indent that would stay there for 10 minutes. That was not normal.
No.
And but again, I was told like, hey, that's just normal. Every pregnant woman, and it's summer in Wisconsin, like you're gonna swell. And
Stop
I,
eating salt.
yeah, I just drink more salt. Yeah, you're fine. But then I went into preterm labor. I went to the hospital with preeclampsia. Didn't know what that was. High blood pressure. I was put on bed rest at the hospital for about a week. And there were so many things that took place, but I ultimately gave birth to my twins. They were good. I thought I was good, but post birth, I was diagnosed with something called HELP syndrome, which my platelet count, which is like the blood cell count in your body, was underneath 30,000, and normal levels are around 100 to 120 plus thousand. So my blood wasn't clotting.
Oh.
And my organs began to fail. And so I always look back to this moment. This was 7 years ago. That was my body. And that was just everything that I had internalized, like having like a cry for help. Like you got to stop manifesting, like suppressing all of these emotions, all of these feelings, all these experiences inside of your body. You gotta let it out. And me being mousy and quiet back then, that was still how I identified myself. And when it came to advocating for my health, it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, because I had such bad people pleaser, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to like be too much. I'm calling them every 5 minutes saying that I don't feel good and this feels so uncomfortable for me. But like whatever was happening inside didn't care. It was just like this inner voice just coming out saying like, no, something's wrong, something's not right, my body's shutting down, this thing. Or like looking back at it and doing the work that I've done, especially during breathwork journeys or quantum healing journeys or life coaching sessions, I recognize that the real me, like the true authentic me, came out in those moments where I was so close to taking my last breath. And I almost didn't have the opportunity to meet that version of myself because I was so afraid.
That's something, how fear can be so all consuming, like backing up, we go all the way back to where you were a teenager and you were afraid of what other people would think, which we're conditioned, right? It's like, you don't want to air your dirty laundry. We don't want the town to know. We don't want people to know what's in our house. We get to have this on the outside, from the window looking in. Everything looks so pretty at the Maas house, right? Or at your family's house. But then when we go in and we start clearing things away, we get to really see there's just a whole lot going on here. And people just, right, they don't want to talk about things. We start to get conditioned. I mean, as a teenager, we're very egocentric as
Mhm.
teenagers. That is the nature of the beast of the teenager. So it's not like you were any different than any other kid in wanting to hold that close to you, right? Because it's like, oh, what could this do to my reputation?
Mhm.
Then as we start to get a little older and we recognize that as that pattern, like you were saying, got repeated, as you kept more in and kept more in, now this is the habit that you have. You have
Mhm.
this habit of not being authentically you, not sharing what your real truth is and what you want to say. And then the fear, and then the fear, and then the fear. And you have all of these fears that are really, um, I mean, we're born with the fear of falling, which is why we have baby startle. and then the fear of loud noises, right? So those two things are really the inborn things. And the rest gets put into us as time goes on by well-meaning people, right? I mean, our parents, they've always done the best they could with the information they have, the people around us. But we internalize things in the way we read the world and receive the world from an energy level. That's our view of the world, and everything so far up until this point has helped shape you into the amazing woman that I know you to be. I have been the private recipient of your breathwork journeys. I have participated in your workshops that you have. I've been to your conferences. I'm telling you, audience, is good stuff, and for healing, it's amazing, right? Because when we allow to come to the light can be healed. And
Mm-hmm.
you have been such an integral part of my own personal journey. I'm so grateful that we have crossed paths, because I had done breath work, and I've done different breath work classes, and I've done breath work with private people. But the way that you do it, you have breath work, and then you also have sound healing, and you've collaborated together, and you bring an experience that's just unique,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been beautiful. And all of that came from you starting to follow the breadcrumb trails and getting curious about your own life and wanting something different than what you saw modeled for you, um, which is completely wonderful, because every generation and every lineage gets to take the good and then pitch out the bad, and we get to up level our lives and break the generational curses of not using your voice as a woman. And here
Mm-hmm.
you are, taking a stand and saying, not just for yourself, you're not just taking a stand for yourself, you're taking a stand for all women. Because, like, again, back to what you were saying about um, working in collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, the dawn of man, right? The women have been kind of put at, like we're a dowry was given for this female to go marry somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were only so many men, and so, or quality men. And so we were kind of pit against each other at this level of competition. But what was missed were the stories of how the women came together,
Mm-hmm.
and how the women would rally around a woman giving birth, and how a woman would, the elder women would step in and show the younger woman how to nurture, this new life that she has. And those, I feel like, a lot of those stories are just lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you are bringing that back, that relationship, that piece of all of that from, centuries ago, that says, you know, we're supposed to lock arms and do this together. The wisdom comes from the elders, and it comes down. But I will say, as an elder, um, that there is so much wisdom that is coming from these younger generations. I am celebrated frequently, by yourself, by the community, and I'm so grateful for that. Um, you shared a little bit, Ashley, about, like, as you were telling your story, little pieces um, about how the the change came about. But could you elaborate a little bit more about, like, what steps did you take that where you were finally like, the light was shining, the hood was popped up, and you were like, oh, okay, I'm seeing how all of this comes together here. What did you do kind of first, and how did that look, that journey to healing and acceptance? And
It was pretty, honestly, in the beginning it was a little rough because I didn't really understand any sort of I processed it in the way that I was meant to, right? So I went to school to become a social worker. And I got my bachelor's degree in social work because I wanted to work with people. So I learned all the therapeutic strategies. I also got another bachelor's degree in special education, went to, or in social, not in Spanish, went back for my master's in special education. And so I had learned so much about other people and human behavior, and it just started to shine small little lights on my own life here and there. Like I remember sitting in class and just listening to some concepts or doing some case studies on families. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds so much like my family. And then in working with kids specifically, because that's where I focused my work, is I would work with at-risk youth. I worked with juvenile children who were in juvenile detention centers who had done some pretty horrific things to other kids, and understanding like how that was generationally happening and like what kind of conditioning they were put under and what kind of pressure they were put under as children in order to like be a part of these acts. And I learned so much compassion and about childhood adversity, and it just started to, I guess, release the foggers that I had. And when I went through my near death experience in 2017, 1 year after that, I publicly posted my story on Facebook. I wrote this very long post about my birth experience, talking about HELP syndrome, talking about preeclampsia. And that post got, this was also when I had like 300 Facebook friends that were all like family and friends. But that post got shared so many times in like survivor groups, all these different areas. And then I had random people messaging me like, oh my gosh, I went through this too. Or, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing symptoms like this too. And I went to the doctor and I found out that I'm preeclamptic. I think you just saved my life. And
chills thinking about it.
yeah, it was just like, holy shit. The one thing that I thought nobody cared about except for me and my family, because we were the ones that experienced it. There's so much healing when you just like share it. And from that moment, I started to get curious about my life. And I started to look at like my relationship dynamic in my marriage. And I realized how I manifested a marriage just like my parents. Soon after decided we weren't good fits for each other, went our separate ways. And then I went through a whole entire process of like 2 years of just projecting. I identified with the role of victim complex. And I was like, my ex was this, he was such a terrible person. I never took responsibility of like the role that I played in that, because at that time I was going to survivor groups on domestic violence. I was learning about like trauma bonds and narcissistic abuse, and like I enveloped like my life to fit that versus really using my experience to empower people. It was more just like a cast of like, look at all the bad things all these people did in my life and da da da, and it's just da da da. And then something happened where I went through 2 relationships after my divorce that taught me 2 very unique lessons. One of them taught me that I struggled a lot with abandonment of like, I thought it was my dad. Like my dad abandoned us as a child or as a teenager. So I'm angry and resentful towards him, when really it came down to abandonment of self.
Sure.
I was projecting onto one person that did leave my life. But again, like you said, only doing what he knew and doing the best that he could with the knowledge that he had. And so he helped me really heal those abandonment wounds. And then the second one was a total self-love, self-worth, understanding, compassion. And that's where Own Your Shit kind of came from. It was this one experience that took place that kind of just like unearthed all of like the shit I was internalizing. And now trust when I say that it can feel scary to begin to share things from a space, but when you are rooted in love and when you feel like, oh my gosh, there are just so many lessons that I want to share from this experience. It's not about the other people. It's not about what they did to you or how they came in and out of your life. It's about how you experienced it and how you take it and learn from that.
Mhm.
And I was sitting at in Montana in a she shed, and I recorded my very first podcast episode, Own Your Shit. And it was, I don't even remember what I called it, but I recorded it in the she shed on my phone. And I'm like, I don't need the fancy equipment. I don't need nothing. And I went through all the worst case scenarios of like, oh my gosh, what if these people find out? I'm like, this is your story, your perspective. And you're doing everything in your due diligence to protect the identity and integrity of those relationships. You're doing nothing wrong other than sharing you. And um, later that night, there was a record storm tornado that ripped through Missoula. And we were stuck on the top of a mountain with trees everywhere. And I'm like, okay, God, I hear you. Like, it was a testament of what I was fearing. Like it I guess it was like how I saw it was a physical manifestation of like how much inner conflict I felt and
Yeah.
fear that I felt. And in the moment of like this tornado, when we're sitting in between two down trees, hoping that a tree doesn't come down on our vehicle, I felt nothing but peace.
Mhm.
And I just sat in the car while some people were panicking and they're like, oh my God, what do I do? Ashley, can you just give me some breathwork strategies to like regulate? And I was just like, in the middle of the storm, I felt nothing but peace. And I'm like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. This is exactly what I'm supposed to do. And I thank you for this clear message. I know it's going to be tough. I know it's going to come with some kickback. I know that I'm going to lose people. I know that I'm going to gain people, but this is my purpose
Mhm.
and I don't care. And if, and like, it's not my problem who takes offense to it, because this is my story and we
Yeah.
all deserve to share our secrets and our stories. And yeah, so I shared that. And um from I'm on going on episode 11 now, and I've gotten, even in my journey of since 2018, I've gotten gag orders, I've gotten cease and desist, I've been threatened to go to court. I've told people, like, people try to, say, oh my gosh, she's just talking about herself, or oh this, and people talk about their perceptions of it, but when you know who you are, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And again, rooting yourself, your stories in love, not ego.
I think, like what you're doing is, it's beautiful. First of all, the lowest level of awareness is an animal awareness, and that awareness is where projection of blame comes from. That's a he made me, she made me, it made me. And my mentor would say, if anybody can make you mad, sad, or glad, you've been had, right? Because it's really about knowing yourself. And as you continue to rise, because, as you continue to move up the levels of awareness and you start to open up, what happens is you're actually removing yourself from this, and you're looking at the situation and you're saying, there is so much gold in here for other people to learn from. And so you step forward into the light and you answer the call and you say, you know what? I I have these stories to share that can be impactful for so many other people, even if it's one, right? Because if it's one person, that affects another person, right? Because, especially as women, like, we tell each other, it's like, did you hear this, or I heard this, or I learned that kind of thing, and we're talking about it. But so you're just climbing up. You take the ego aside. We need the ego. I mean, the ego is important. I mean, we all would walk around naked if we didn't have an ego. We would just be like, woo, here we go. But that keeps us, there's certain things that the ego does for us and we need. And as, you continue to move through your spiral and, coming up and seeking, enlightenment, if you will, if that's what you want to call it. But really what's happening is you are becoming and recognizing your oneness with God, with source, with universe, whatever you want to call it. And in that oneness, you plugging in, you're like, I know I'm being called to this. This feels so right in my body. I have all of these things to share, and you're doing it. And then other people are going to have a temper tantrum about some of the stuff that you're talking about, but that's their crap. Like
Mhm.
they get to, and you get to continue to evolve and grow and do what you know you're being called to do. And I love that about you, because when you started out this thing and said that you were mousy and quiet, I've never met you mousy and quiet. And so I'm like, what?
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
uh, so it's so fun for me to be able to hear that and hear that, you know, you've come from this where you were so afraid to speak your truth and so afraid to tell anybody anything. And now you're standing on a box,
Mhm.
shouting, saying, you know what, here, like, let's learn and grow from this. And it's not an in your face type thing. You're just speaking from your heart and saying, here's the things I've learned and how I've grown. You're not poking somebody in the eyeballs with it, which is beautiful, right? You're not like, oh, I'm going to make you pay and you pay and you pay. And that's not what's happening here with your
Mhm.
podcast. Your podcast is just about how you've grown. And these are the things you've learned along the way. And this is what matters.
Mhm.
And what could be more beautiful than that?
Yep. Amen.
I love it. I love it. So, tell me, how does this bring you, this sense of peace and fulfillment um, into your world? This evolution of Ashley. How have you found that peace and that fulfillment?
I feel that it really comes down to, like, it's connection for sure. It's
Mhm.
being connected with myself. And I wish that I could just project what happens in my brain, because sometimes I go through, like, I'm like analyzing every aspect, and sometimes I'm just like, okay, we're just here. It is what it is. And that's how I've chosen to lead with my life. It just is. I don't wait around for permission to do something anymore. Where in the past I would always be like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Do you think it's a good idea? No, I
Mm.
think that being in the position that I am in, I really do want to role model that to my children,
Yeah.
and to show them that you can literally achieve anything that you want to when you just believe, when you really embody that. It's all about embodiment for me. So connection and embodiment is, I don't, there's like this concept of faking it till you make it. And I know that's a concept that's thrown around, but in some aspect, that's almost like it's an embodiment. Like, you're acting as if it's already happened. You're acting as if you already have it. Because when you put yourself in that energy, things just naturally remove themselves that are not meant for you, and you can release it with love. And I won't lie, like, there's been moments where I'm like, like, ego comes in, swoops in, because we're human, right? And
Yeah.
you're not always going to be here. You're not always going to be regulated. Anybody who ever tells you, like, oh yeah, you can just always be elevated all times, every time, that's not true. It's how quickly can you recalibrate and come back to self. It's when you experience a dagger and you let that hurt for a little bit, you release it, and then you come back to center and you're like, it is what it is, moving forward versus moving backward. So I approach everything in my life that way, my relationships, opportunities, things that come in and out. And I just feel like, as individuals, and if you're listening to this, it's give yourself permission to just keep moving forward, and
One step at a time.
just one step at a time. And sometimes you'll fall, and that's okay. Yeah, life is really about living, and that's why I love it so much. Like, I love breath work, and it's such a, if you've ever done a breathwork journey with me, like one of the long ones, and you feel the tingling and the vibrations, that stuff used to scare me. It used to, like, oh no, I don't like that. But now it's like, holy crap, this is what it feels like to be fully alive, like
Mhm.
fully online. And Life is about living. It's about experiencing this and understanding that sometimes you'll have these and sometimes you'll have these. And it's how quickly can you come back to center? How quickly can you recalibrate?
Oh my God, absolutely. The bounce back is huge. It's like, um, I just released a podcast episode with my mentor, which was a huge honor for me to be able to have that. But we talked about like something because life is gonna life, right? You're gonna get the punch in the nose. It's gonna be like, okay, you think you're ready, you think that you've moved on to the next level. Here's a punch in the nose for you, but it's like, can you take the punch? Can you let it bleed? And can you stand back up and be like, I got this, right? It's like I could wallow in it, like you talked about being the victim. I could be the victim and be like, I got punched in the nose. I think Marsha Brady from the Brady
Yeah.
punch in the nose, right? Or I can be like, ooh, I got punched in the nose. What did I learn from that punch?
Mhm.
That because everything is here to help guide us in that evolution of our soul, to remind us of our oneness with God. Why am I here?
Yep.
Period. What is all of this all about? And you're sharing everything that you're sharing so that you can help other people take their first step,
Mhm.
right? Because some people, right, they're just getting out there. They're just seeing, that this is a possibility, right? And we live in a land of possibility, and anything is possible. And like you speaking into, when you speak into your future, when
Mhm.
you see yourself, so the fake it till you make it. I mean, it's a beautiful concept if people understand what that means is it's actually seeing yourself as if
Mhm.
I'm already seeing myself with the goal already attained. I can envision, what does she look like? What does she sound like? How does she move her body? Like, yeah, like she's not meek and quiet.
Mhm.
She's like, yeah, like she knows she can be independent. She also knows she can be an amazing partner. She also knows she can help people heal, right? There's like so much that goes into that. Anyways, um, can you just share with the audience like nugget of wisdom, one nugget of wisdom that you think is like the epitome of gold nuggets?
The epitome of gold nuggets.
Yeah.
I I would say the question I always ask is like, honestly, what are you waiting for, and what are you so afraid of? That's a question that you get to sit with yourself with, and I encourage you to write about it, sit with it, meditate, pray on it. Like, what is it that you are genuinely so afraid of? Because when you can recognize that life is a gift that you are given, this lifetime that you're having here is a one time thing. What are you so afraid of? Failing? Losing? What?
Yeah.
Like, life, that is life. And just go for it. That is the biggest piece. Is like, whatever you want to do, and maybe you don't know, maybe you have no idea, but start with, what am I so afraid of in this job transition, in sharing on stage, in reaching out to this girl to mentor me? Like, what is it that I'm so afraid of? Rejection, betrayal? What is it?
100%. That's such a great question. Ashley, I have really enjoyed our time together. I would love for you to share with the audience how they can find you.
You can find me, best place to connect with me is on Instagram. You can find me at Ash Rise Up Experiences. That, just follow me, connect with me, message me. And Own Your Shit podcast is also available on all streaming platforms. So I encourage you to also listen to that. And I would, yeah, definitely. But if you're a Facebook girly, I'm on Facebook, Ashley Maas.
That's so perfect. And I'll have all of that in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your wisdom with us. I do appreciate you. I adore you. So, so,
You.
so grateful that our paths have crossed. And um, I have learned and grown in your presence as well. So it's been a beautiful journey. But thanks again for being on the Secret Keepers podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Secret Keepers podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a like and follow so we can invite you back. And if you just want more, visit CorrineZuleger.com. Remember, you're not alone.